So, welcome to another Secret Influence TV interview. Today, I'm excited to be chatting to Ray or R.C. Hans. He's an author, a traveller, and Secret Influence TV is a channel where I chat to people who inspire or influence. So I believe influencing is such an important skill in life. If you want to have success in whatever you do, you need to be able to influence people. You know, you need to make an impact, and whether that's really running a business, your career, sharing your message. I believe everyone has expertise to share or a story to tell. So, so thank you. Yeah, so Ray, it's great to have you. Great to catch up with you. Thank you for giving your time this morning. So I'm based in London, and I think you're in California. Bit of a time difference.
Yes.
So just to start, looking, you're right in the moment. Just looking back, do you want to just tell us a bit about, your early career? What you've not always been just like a day. Obviously you're retired at the moment, and you've been a writer for your life, and we're going to talk about that. What do you do in your early career? How what led to where you becoming a writer? What do you do?
Well, I was a plastering and drywall contractor.
Okay.
And I grew up. My father was in the same business, but we owned restaurants. And
Okay.
I grew up in a rather interesting background. We had a very interesting clientele, and I met a lot of criminals and alcoholics and wonderful people with interesting stories to tell.
That's something I saw. I think it was on your website. You said about you tell stories about people's behaviour and some many people you met, and I'm always fascinated by behaviour. I'm a copywriter, and I'm fascinated by why people do what they do and what motivates people to act in a certain way. What would you say? Why do you? Have you always written? I mean, have you always written? Has it been something you've done since a young child, or was there a certain point where you decided, I want to share my stories? Oh, I've got.
Yes, I wrote my first novel when I was in 6th grade.
Wow.
about Little League baseball.
Okay.
And I can't remember a thing about it or where it went, but that was in my blood at that time.
Okay. Well, you started young then. How do you get your inspiration for your stories? You've written quite. How many books have you written? How many books have you written now?
Maybe 7.
Okay.
And I have a couple I'm working on right now. I like to investigate people and their behavior and why people do unintelligent things. And also I like to investigate people who are, as you mentioned, leaders or thinkers or people that help society. And I think that we need to pay more attention to those kind of people and talk about them.
Fantastic.
I love the Pillars of the Earth and the Middle Ages and England. My family came from Devonshire many generations ago.
Okay.
And when I'm in London, I feel like I'm at home, just as my wife does.
Okay, well, that's good. We've got a weird connection there. So I'm based in London. So, would you say that? So all your stories are based on? Do they have something based on your experience of in life and the people you meet? Is that fair to say?
To some degree, they take place in different times, of course, in different times in history.
Oh.
But I have a couple of detective novels I've written. I have an Asian folk tale that I've written. And the process is very interesting. I think it's different for everyone. But I sit down and I hear people talking to me, and I have to write those stories.
Okay. You always have a little notebook with you, or?
Yes. And if I have a dream, I get up and write it down. I have a new novel I just finished. It's not available yet, but
Okay.
I was on a cruise to Iceland.
Oh,
and
wow.
I watched a very interesting program on the Fabergé eggs.
Oh,
and
yes.
that gave me the impetus to write a novel about a house that's full of art treasures.
Fantastic.
And so whatever I see, sometimes it inspires me to write something maybe closely related to that, maybe not, but it gives me that inspiration to tell a story.
Okay. And I know, you write sort of travel blogs and you write your books. Traveling is clearly a big part of what, your life. How many countries have you been to? I know it's incredible. Quite a lot.
Nearly 100, including North Korea,
Wow.
the Five Stands, Mongolia, Zimbabwe, South
Wow.
Africa, uh, many,
Would
many places.
is it one place that stands out as somewhere you
We
particularly?
look back at Nepal as a very interesting learning experience. How you measure people's wealth is different in the West.
Sure.
And to be in Nepal, you see a lot of very wealthy people. They have lovely family structure and they're wonderful people. And everywhere I've gone, I meet wonderful people. But Nepal is something that stays in our memory. It's so beautiful there and still rustic and natural.
Okay. And is it one place? Is there somewhere you haven't been yet that's still on your list of travels?
Yes, we're scheduled to go to Egypt in a year or so. Um, I have friends from what is it? Oh, on the East Coast, across from Italy. Uh,
Okay.
Mountain, uh, oh, I can't even think of the name of the country at the moment. But everywhere we want to, and the more rugged, the better. We want to see what those rugged places do to us. How do you react to being in circumstances where things don't always go well, and when you don't have the creature comforts we're used to in the first world?
No, I get that definitely. Um, which do you have any sort of? I know you write sort of travel blogs and you write your story, your novels. Do you have any? Do you approach them? Do you have any preference over what you write? Is there? Do you prefer to do you prefer to write your novels, or do you prefer to write your sort of travel blogs in that way? Is there any?
I think at this point my novels are more important. I've kind of covered all the countries we've been to on my travel blog. I still have to finish my trip to the Five Stands, but it's a little bit involved, so I have to go back and read some notes and so forth. But I'm working on a novel that's a prequel to my spy thriller, which is Grandpa Ernie's Secrets. And
Okay.
this novel is more about World War II, the CIA, and putting my characters that I've created into the real battles of World War II. And so, of course, it's going to be a little more arduous to do this since I'll have to actually study some things and be accurate.
Sure. Do you find you have to do a lot of research for your novels, or have you managed, is it mostly so far be able to sort of you play that creative,
I do some.
imagination?
I do some. Most of my novels are character driven.
Right.
So the time and the place isn't as important as the personality of the character. My novel, The Adventures of the Smith Family, is about the reign of King George III and before that time. And so in that sense, I have to do a little research to understand that who's involved in those times. But it's a universal story about becoming successful by treating people fairly and being honest and having some integrity.
Okay. Okay. That's great. What looking back, looking back over the last year, obviously it's been a challenging year. I think everyone around the world with the sort of COVID pandemic and the way it's affected our life. How have you kept motivated? How have you has it affected you much? I mean, how have you kept motivated in this, the challenges around
Well, we have more time because we don't go out as often. My
oh,
wife and I are both retired. So it's easier for us, and we haven't had to struggle as much as young working people who've not been able to work and so forth.
sure.
And our hearts go out to them, obviously, because it's become very difficult for people that are younger than us to function in the world.
Okay.
Um, I think it's a good and important time to reflect on the possibilities of things like this happening and how, as a society or as societies, how we're going to deal with this. This will be a watershed moment, but I don't
Oh,
think that it's going to be quite as long affecting us as long as some people say it does, because humans are so resilient after all.
No, I agree. I agree. And is there anyone? I mean, obviously, your stories. You know, there's a lot of your experience have inspired those. Is there anyone in life that's, or anyone that inspires you? You know, is anyone you've anyone that's any you find inspirational in life?
Absolutely. Many people, I'm just an average blue collar working guy. And there are
Okay.
lots of people out there who are well versed in history. I'm interested in history. I'm not an expert. There
Sure.
are so many people and so much information out there that we need to be aware of and to be reading about and learning from all the time. I think that writers tend to be more influential to me than anyone. I'm reading all the time, and I'm reading the books I should have read when I was in high school. uh,
Okay.
Red Badge of Courage, or uh, any number of books. I'm reading them now when I should have read them 50 years ago.
Sure. And another thing I saw on your website about one of the things you said was you help other retirees pioneer a new course in their life by sharing your experience, for preparing to travel. Do you think like age is just a number? You know, do you think obviously there are different different people view different stages in life in different way? And obviously when we retire, how we view that and what we do with that time, do you think age is a number? Do you think
I was
um
very fortunate because I had a physical job, so
sure.
that
Okay.
kept me in condition. I was a spreader, as they call
Okay.
them in England, and so I was very physically active. I'm very healthy. I'll be 69 in February. I play handball. I play tennis 4 days a week, and I take a nap every day, and I read. So, and travel doesn't have to be expensive. I think that most of us can save for a couple of years to go on a nice trip somewhere and learn something. And obviously, there are people who aren't as mobile as I am, and that's what's so wonderful about having the internet and being able to read. And we live in a wonderful time where we have this technology. Is that even a person who is somewhat disabled or immobile can still read a book and have a wonderful adventure in their own home.
Sure. No, of course. I can. Yeah, no, I agree. I think the last year, and the moment, there's been many challenges, and I think in some ways, we are lucky that we can use the online world and reach out to people through that. So it's challenges and opportunities. Um, would you say that uh, that let me ask you a question about, I know I'm going to share some of your details before this post. With your website, it's called Cowboy Productions. How do is there any reason for that name? How did you call that name? I was quite curious.
Yeah, I worked 6 days a week for 38 years.
Okay, wow.
And sometimes I would get burnt out.
Sure.
And I would tell my wife, I just want to be a cowboy.
Right.
And she said, when you pay off all the bills and the mortgages, you can be a cowboy.
Okay.
So that's where that comes from. And
Okay, no, fair enough.
52 was the year that I was born.
Okay, that makes sense. That's a very personal reference there, like that. Um, so I'm just to share that I'm a copywriter, so I help businesses write to build their brand and share their story, and I'm passionate about writing. Do you think what do you think about storytelling as a way to share information, share expertise, inspire people? Do you think, is it something you say you read? Do you think is what do you think about reading and as a way to sort of share stories? I think it's such a powerful thing to inspire people and influence people in that way.
Absolutely. I think it's so important because you can sit down and not be interrupted and digest these thoughts, which is sometimes difficult in a conversation. If you're in a noisy place or if you have a disagreement with someone, if when you're reading text, even of people you don't agree with, you have a better opportunity to digest it and see what they're talking about and what their ideas are.
And do you, with your writing, I know that different writers approach the process differently. What's your sort of, do you sort of lock yourself away and, have a little, brain, lock yourself away while you're writing and sort of lock, for a set period of time and sort of, brainstorm your ideas, or do you do it gradually over time? Do you have a certain process you approach your writing? I mean, you've written quite a few novels now and you write regularly. Do you have a set way you approach it?
Yes, I look at it like a job. I don't need the income, but it's a challenge for me. So I stay in my office 5-6 hours a day. I have sent out 9,300 emails over the COVID situation, and I spend a couple hours a day communicating with people in the world to try and grow my brand. I look at it as a job, and I enjoy it. Like with my first job, I enjoyed it very much. I was very fortunate in that. A lot of people don't enjoy their work, and I have a artistic nature, so that my work was artistic in that I was plastering or tiling something, and writing is artistic. I paint also poorly, as poorly as I write, perhaps, but I enjoy it, and I find it educational for myself to go through that process. I have learned so much through the research on the books that I've written that it's remarkable. Absolutely remarkable. And there's so much more to learn. It's so sad that we're not here long enough to learn everything there is to learn. And of course, nowadays, perhaps people don't appreciate how much information there is out there that came about a long time ago that may not be relevant and may not be talked about a lot, but that's very important.
I think there's a good point you've shared there, Ray, about doing it just so you enjoy. And I think in life, whether you do, if you enjoy it, then you're more likely to succeed at it. And obviously, what you set as your measurement of success is, it's going to be different. But yeah, if you enjoy things in life, that's the best motivator why you do things. What's your, I mean, obviously we're a bit restricted by the sort of current situation, but what's your plan for ideally, what's your plan for next year? Would you, if you could, you mentioned Egypt, are you working another novel? Are you planning to do some more traveling? What's your sort of plans for next year?
We have a trip up the Mississippi next year to visit Hannibal, Missouri, and the land of Mark Twain. I'm a very big fan of Mark Twain, and we're going to drive back home from there, back to California. We have lots of countries we still want to go to. We haven't been to all the countries in Africa, and we have a few in South America we haven't been to. And hopefully we'll be here long enough to get to go and see some other places and learn some things and meet some wonderful people. The people are the thing that makes these trips so invaluable, is to have these connections with people and learn about their desires and what they want in their lives for themselves and their children and their country.
No, I agree. Everything in life is about people. With advancing technology, it all comes down to people and relationships. And what I always ask people when I chat to them, if they could share a few tips. I think one thing, I get from you is that, it's whatever age you're at, if you do what you're passionate about, then and enjoy the process, then that's, obviously fundamental to having a motivation to do, to achieve something, achieve things, you do what you enjoy, and there's no age, it doesn't matter whether you do it when you're young or whether when you're retired. Do you have any? If someone's like, they want to be they want to be a writer, they write, and they, any tips for anyone, wanting to, if they're struggling, if they want to be a writer, or perhaps they write and they're struggling with motivation, or they're not, they're with a process. Any tips do you have, from your experience?
Yes, I think everyone has something of value to offer. And you may not think so, but look into yourself and pick up a pencil and a paper and write down some things that have happened to you or that you've learned from your parents or that you've experienced. And some famous author said, write what you know. And a lot of my characters come out of dysfunctional people because I grew up in that environment. But write what you know and write every day. Don't complain. Don't give up. Life isn't easy. It wasn't meant to be easy. It's easier, but it's still difficult. And if you never make a nickel out of your writing, you will have learned so much and exercised your brain. It's a win-win no matter how you slice it.
No, I think it's a lot of the life is about setting, having good habits, and like you say, so do a little bit every day, and a daily commitment to work, setting aside the time every day to do what you need to do to reach your target. With your novels, I mean, for people who don't, with your books, a lot of people don't know. Share some links so people can, connect your website and have a look. Do you have a particular genre, or particularly you mentioned obviously a spy novel? You mentioned the the Royal King Henry VIII. I mean, do you have any sort of particular genre that really interests you to write about, or is it quite a mix?
Well, I like history, and so I think historical fiction is my pleasure at the moment. But all of those different the stories are all the same, aren't they? They just take place in different times.
Sure.
I forget who it was. Someone said there's only 9 stories to write about. Love, power, money, it's all the same stories. It's just the time frame and how you focus on it and how you look at it. So it's all the same to me.
Okay. Yeah, no, I can see that. So I mean, I think I was listening to a podcast the other day, and someone they were saying there's not many new new inventions, new ideas left. Everything's been discovered. Everything follows the same formula, but with a little twist in it. I think it's the same with stories. If there's a set sort of formula, but and every film, every book is a little twist on a certain structure around the character and story that all makes a story. Look at other things, other mediums. So obviously, you read our books. Do you I think it's films? Is that do you listen? Do you watch films? Do you listen to podcasts? Is anything or is it just books really your thing in that way?
Oh yes, I started writing seriously when I retired, and so everything that I watch with a different eye now.
Okay.
Movies and documentaries. Anything that I read, I look at it as a person who wants to learn the technique of that also. I have lots of room to improve. There's no doubt about that. So I see things in a different way. And I was always an inquisitive person. And this has just made me more inquisitive. Sadly, humans have not changed in the last 30,000 years. We have electricity, we have cars, but humans are identical to what they were before. We have a limited process of thinking. We have tribal connections. We have club connections and all these things. So we are basically the same as we've always been, but the writing and the reading that you do molds you into perhaps a better visage of yourself, an improved possible self.
I think that's a good point there. It's like storytelling. We've done it since the beginning of time, and it's always been a way we've shared our wisdom, shared our knowledge, and when we were living, as cavemen, we were telling stories to teach our, the younger generations. Even now, with storytelling is a way we share information, and with business or personal life. And yeah, I think that that some of these things just don't change. Would you say that when you plan your novels, do you get do you plan a lot in advance? Do you sort of I know you said you always have a little notebook, you get ideas when you sleep. Is it a sort of an ongoing creative process? Do you have little bursts of inspiration?
Absolutely. I have a very vivid imagination.
Okay.
My dreams are like movies. I'm very fortunate. I remember them, and I have no end of activity going on in my brain. I have to tell you, I had to retire at 62. I had an epileptic seizure, and I'm on a medication that one of the side effects is that it stimulates your imagination. And that has been my experience since I've been on this medication.
Okay.
It has been very easy to write. And I'm not going to
Okay.
tell anyone what it is, but it's legal.
No, that's great. I've got a 5-year-old son, and one of the things I love about spending time with him is he's got such a incredible imagination, and he is always telling stories. And I think with some ways we lose that. We start as children with an amazing imagination, and storytellers and seeing other worlds, and somewhere we lose that as we get older. We lose that sort of creative imagination, storytelling.
I have to say, pardon me, part of my upbringing, we had family businesses. So
Okay.
from the time I was 8 years old, I had to work. I had a shine box. I swept parking lots and cleaned bathrooms and all of those things. I didn't have time to play with my mates. As an adult, I am still somewhat childlike in that sense, because now I have the time to go out and my work was wonderful because I visited with 6 different families every day. But my childhood was very different than most in that I was surrounded by adults. And so I didn't lose that inquisitiveness because it was postponed.
Okay, that's interesting you say that. Do you think, so in essence, your upbringing does, we know that our upbringing influences our behavior and our thoughts, and how we are in the later stage of life. But would you say, did your upbringing have a profound effect on on your your storytelling, for example, your imagination? Say, it came to your upbringing. Would you say that's fair to say that your the way you view life is has come from your upbringing?
Absolutely. And my upbringing was very different from most people, but all of us, our views are there because of how we were brought up, our living experiences. Mine were just very different from the norm. I lived in a restaurant. We slept on the pool table or in the booths. Wow. Until we had enough money to buy a home. My childhood was a little bit rough and ragged. And I look back on it fondly. I met some very interesting people and saw some very interesting things. And some people would call that child abuse.
Sure.
But I call it an adventure. And I learned not to emulate the people that I was surrounded by, but to use it like the university and learn not to be like those people, but to learn from their stories. And that's what a lot of my stories have dysfunctional people in them. And also I have to be careful about writing about people and their drinking habits, because for me, all of my friends were alcoholic adults. And so I don't see people drinking as being out of the ordinary, where most people would be affected by that and be a bit nonplussed.
Sure.
I see it as my normal environment, and it's just how the world was. I don't drink, however, so obviously that had a profound effect on the way that I grew up. I quit smoking at 12, and I don't drink coffee because I made coffee for 10 years when I was a child, and I hated the coffee grounds. Sure. So all those things, as in everyone's life, those things you live through have a profound effect, whether you realize it or not.
No, I agree. I think some of the things that influence us most in life are the things we're not really so aware of. And I think in life, we're influenced all the time. We influence other people, and things have influenced us. And a lot of things that influence us are things that we don't realize influence us. It's sort of that background sort of interactions or information. Would you say, so I've read an interesting thing about stories saying every story should have a point. If there's no point to the story, then the story has no point. Do your stories is there a message? Do you think, because the message, stories can obviously entertain, they can inspire, they can, they can be just inform, but do you, do you write, is there a little message in your stories? Is there some, do you think, do you think every story has a message?
I think that The Adventures of the Smith Family, which was my first novel, which came out of nowhere, which has a religious, spiritual overtone, came at me from nowhere. I didn't have that type of life. That book is I think is the only important book that I've written, in the sense that it discusses these issues of being an honest, trustworthy person. My other books are basically full of the opposite type of person. The detective novels and my other novels are full of people who are dysfunctional, and we have the police there to control their behavior.
Sure.
I have an Asian folk tale, which is, I really enjoy that book. It's an interesting story. My books are character driven. They have action, but we get to know these characters, and I think, and I hope we empathize with them when they deserve that, and maybe we dislike them when they deserve that also. But these books are happening and should be explored between the ears, and not so much in the actual actions of the characters. What's driving these people to do these things? Why do they do these things? Why are they different from us? And it's a constant mystery every day. We see people around us who make bad decisions, and how responsible are we to make their lives more functional? How do you do that? Can you do that? Are we responsible to do that? Yes, and yes, I suppose. But it's a difficult proposition any way you slice it. But it's a learning process. Life is a learning process.
I was going to ask you about, you clearly, when you research a book, or you're learning, and we were learning all the time. Do you think learning is an important part of your life? Because I guess by traveling, we're learning about other countries and cultures. When we research a book, we're learning, and I always say that the only way to, if you're running a business, you've got to keep learning. You've got to learn the latest methods and techniques. You've got to learn. Keep always expand your mind and be open and keep learning. Do you think that's an important thing to you, to keep
absolutely
learning?
Absolutely. And my wife and I love going on group tours, and
okay,
and hopefully, and usually things go wrong, and that's the fun part of a trip. And you see how your compatriots react to these unforeseen experiences, whether they are flummoxed by them, or made unhappy by them, or roll with whatever seems to happen.
Sure.
And so that, again, I'm interested in seeing how people react to these kind of influences. It's fascinating. Just the fact that there are people on this planet who can never be anywhere on time is fascinating.
It's true. Yeah.
It's a choice they made not to be available when they're supposed to be there. And yet they think they're going to be successful in this world, and they can't get to work at 9 o'clock. I mean, that's a simple choice you make every day.
It's true. No, I'm a member of Toastmasters. I think it was a international speech club, which was founded in America almost 100 years ago. And I gave a speech recently about a lot of quite wealthy, successful people like the head of Apple and Bill Gates, and Richard Branson's Virgin. They wear the same clothes a lot of the time. In public, and they always seem wearing the same style of outfit. And it was saying, my speech was about why they do this is to because it's one less decision. They want to have good habits. They want to have less decisions to make every day. They don't want to be late. They don't want to have to worry about what to wear. And so they wear the same outfit. They have a very structured day. So I think it's interesting about about
isn't that why we get married?
Maybe, yes, true.
We have someone there to help us make those decisions.
I think certainly, we have humans. Yeah, we're very social, and I think certainly relationships. Like you said earlier, people. It's all about people at the end of the day, and I think relationships in business or personal life, is all about people. And that's what I love about the whole novel, the whole writing thing, because I write short stories. It is all about the character and the relationship of the character, what happens to that character. And then they say, if you watch a film or read a book, if you can't get invested in that character, you can't connect, then you're not going to carry on watching the film or read the book. It is all about characters.
That's right. I belong to some writing groups, and someone made a comment the other day about being a good writer or a bad writer and writing a story. And you can be a great writer if you're writing about an uninteresting story. It's going to be an uninteresting story. If you're a crappy writer, if you have some good information, you can make an interesting story even if your skills are lacking.
Okay, that's nice.
It's what the story is about, not the person who tells it.
And on that point, do you find these sort of groups helpful? This is thought, but no one goes alone, in life, and even the self-made millionaires, that's no one's self-made. Everyone has support, and does it, connections and support, and mentors, coaches, whatever. It's so important in life. Whatever you do, do you find that in writing that being part of these groups is an important part of keeping yourself motivated, getting ideas? Would you say that's an important thing? And
absolutely, because you see people writing about their struggles in writing. I don't participate a lot, but I think I want to be a cheerleader for people who want to write and are trying to write. And you can't help but learn from these people lamenting about their issues, and you think about how lucky you are and perhaps how you might help them get over that. The trick is pick up a pencil and start writing. It's, a trip starts with one step. Do it. Don't procrastinate. I never had a job. I was always self-employed. So I knew that if I didn't go to work every day, I wouldn't eat. So my life was that kind of an adventure. I was forced, knowing that I couldn't get unemployment. I had no social network to feed me if I didn't go to work every day. I grew up in a family where my father was self-employed. And here again, so this is a perfect example of what we're talking about, that my brother is self-employed. Growing up in this culture, every family has its own culture. Sure. So if you grow up in a culture where everybody drinks and is late for every appointment they have, it's no surprise that their offspring are the same. I grew up in a culture where we worked for ourselves and took the heat for it, and you can't help but be better off in any number of ways if you rely on yourself for your success rather than waiting for someone to help you along.
No, I love that. I agree with that. That your values are everything in life, and certainly it's personal level or business. We need to our values reflect our brand. If you work for yourself, what everything you do and say affects your brand, but that comes from your values. What you believe, how you behave, and how you want to make a difference in the world. I think that's fantastic. I mean, we're going to have to come to the end of our chat, Ray, but I think that's a fantastic thing to almost finish on is, that it all starts with, one step, about, life is steps forwards and steps back, but, we are humans are procrastinators. We all do think too much about things and sometimes go loops about things and whatever, taking action and even like with writing, even if it doesn't necessarily produce a financial return to start, if we're doing something we enjoy and we're passionate about in life and we're taking action, that's the most important, certainly first step, and that's that will certainly start to make a difference. So any final words, Ray, before we?
Absolutely. If I hadn't have gone on this adventure, I wouldn't have met you.
That's true.
Perfect example. We would not have met except for the fact that I had something that I thought I wanted to say to someone. And so here we are.
Ray, genuinely, it's a real pleasure to catch up and chat with you. And if you're ever in London, visiting family or in this area, do get in touch. But I really thank you for your time and for sharing your experiences and your stories and your tips. And it was really great to catch up. So I wish you the best, and also I'll share your details. Look forward to your next, to reading your novels yourself. I've ordered a few on Amazon, so I'll be reading those when they arrive.
I appreciate it. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Take care, Ray, and best wishes.
Same to you.